Alrighty, what is going on, everybody? My name is Blitzwinger, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new video, and welcome to the Awakens Gaming channel and the Fanboypotion channel, where we get spoilery. If you have not seen, we did a video, the non-spoiler review for Star Wars The Force Awakens. It was very much us kind of almost like handling a hot potato, trying to walk around.
Tricky. It was walking on hot coals. I really wanted to say some things, but
yeah, we were trying to say stuff without saying anything, and that's why it sounded probably as weird as it did. But now we get spoilery. So again, spoiler alert, mentioning it again, this is a spoiler review, and I will mention it one more time. There will be spoilers that we will be discussing within this review, so I don't want to see anybody in the comments go, bro, why didn't you warn us? There's a spoilers, man.
There's gonna be one. You know there's gonna be one.
I know. There has to be.
If you haven't seen the movie, or you know, you don't want to know any spoilers, go. Leave now.
We're reviewing the movie called Star Wars The Force Awakens, which was released on December 18th, and we will be discussing spoilers. I think that was enough for us to mention.
If you've seen the movie, welcome, or if you're just some soulless creature who doesn't care about spoiling the movie, welcome. But please.
Well, maybe you're not a soulless creature. Maybe you just want us to get you hyped, and we'll get you hyped. We'll get you hyped, because we're about to nerd out over this thing like crazy. Funniest thing is that me and Isaac already had like an hour-and-a-half conversation after I watched the movie. But we'll try to recapture that magic. It was actually a good thing, I think, that I slept on it, because I thought to myself, you know, there's a good chance I would wake up, because that's what happened with Avengers Age of Ultron. I remember I was so enthusiastic about it. Then I woke up and I started breaking it down, and I was like, yeah, it was probably not as good as I thought it was initially.
Yeah, it's the hype,
but with this movie,
hype and buzz that gets you thinking it's a lot better than it is. But yeah, I mean,
but bro, with this movie, that's not the case. I think I might like it more now.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't see that coming.
So let's start. I guess we could do it. The best way to start is probably you can start us off, because you have formed like a whole list of like positives and negatives. So what we'll do, guys, is we'll discuss the. Let's start with the negative, just so that we can kind of get it out of the way and end off on sunshine and
all right,
beautiful
so this
thing.
is what we didn't like about the movie.
Yeah, so this is what you didn't enjoy, and I'm going to add to it, kind of talk whether or not I agree, disagree with some things, and we'll just kind of have a conversation, and hope you guys enjoy the ride. Yeah. Let's get started.
Honestly, you know, all these cons that I'm going to say, just, you know, I'm nitpicking. It was a good movie. I enjoyed it, but these are the nitpicky things I would have changed if I had J.J. Abrams' cell phone number, you know.
Would you say this was a good movie or a great movie? Just a quick thing.
Good, not great.
Okay.
Not
right,
great.
fair enough.
Not even very. Yes, very good. I'd say very good. Not great.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay, so one of the first things I didn't like was the amount of CGI. I know it's a Star Wars movie. They're known for having a lot of CGI, especially the prequels. But that's one of the things people hated about it. But I'd led up thinking. I was told that J.J. Abrams was going to use a lot of practical things, and whilst he did, it was still a lot more CGI.
You still felt like there was a lot more than you wanted to?
I mean, there was whole characters that were purely CGI. You know, the big glasses lady. What's she called? Do you know her name? In the cantina.
Mats Kanata, I think.
Yeah.
Or
she was fully CGI. Is that her name? The Snoke was fully CGI. And while I love meets Andy Serkis doing motion capture, I really was disappointed that it was all a lot of CGI. Was it that case for
Maz
you?
Katana, sorry, that's her name.
Did you feel that, or were you okay with it?
I didn't feel that. There was one scene that we talked about last night. One scene that took me out with the CGI, and that's about a third of the way through the movie, when Han has to deal with, well, not just Han, when the gangs that are tracking down Han finally get to him, and they're on that transporter, and then those like tentacle monsters are released. I don't remember their name. They're like batongos or something like that. They did
not belong in the Star Wars universe. I don't.
Yes, they look like something out of like Transformers or like a weird CGI movie, like as of late. Again, they didn't look bad. The problem was that they just didn't fit. I didn't even think that they fit the art style or the like aesthetic of Star Wars.
That's so
I would say that was probably the only scene that I felt that way. I felt like Maz Kanata, actually, she was pretty well done. Like, I felt like they did a great job. Like, when they were so close on her face, and you could see all the pores, and it was on par with, like, I would say it this way. If you had a problem with the Hulk in Avengers Age of Ultron, yes, you will find some characters in this that CGI, but I felt like they gave her enough gravitas. She never felt like a character that was too strong or anything. Like, they did make her feel like the most important thing, in my opinion, with CGI is to give it like weight, because that's what makes the character real, at least to me, is when you can see that that character has a certain amount of weight in that world, and she felt like it was fitting. So to me, I never felt like that was an issue. At any point, I didn't feel like, oh, that took me out. The only one that was the case, it was with those like tentacle things, and that's it.
Yeah, they reminded me of something like a Doctor Who character, or something
you
find in a low budget British sci-fi show.
Like maybe like a Power Rangers episode or something like that.
I mean, I agree with what you just said. I don't think the CGI was done very. I don't know what the budget was for this film. But
$200 million.
Okay, well that's not bad. But compared to something like if you look at Gollum in The Hobbit, I think he was done a lot better. Like, when I was watching that, I didn't constantly think I was watching a CGI creature. I thought he was done a lot better than, the big glasses lady or the monsters. I was fine with, like, the dog fights or the space flying and the Millennium Falcon. Obviously, that's all CGI. No problem with that. I don't like full CGI characters. Some practical effects.
It's interesting because to me, you see, I didn't feel that way in terms of like, because what they did a really, really good job with is, even when they had a CGI character, she was put into an environment that they built. Like that. I forget the name of the planet where they were. Like, whenever they go to Maz, and
Endor 2.0. We'll call it.
Essentially.
Just another forest.
Yes. And that's something that we'll touch upon for sure. Because that was something that I will definitely point out.
That's something I didn't like too,
she definitely felt like that. Obviously, that was a cantina type scene. But within that environment, it felt real. Like, they built all those creatures and everything, and then she was the only one that was CGI, so it didn't feel like out of place. To me, that was never a concern to me or felt weird or anything like that. So I would say, look, for some people, maybe it is an issue to a certain extent, but I think that the only one that was really kind of took me out of it was the fact that we saw the what is it called? Those like tentacle monsters. Other than that, I felt like it was pretty good. Even with Supreme Leader Snoke, he's a hologram. Like, obviously he'll be CGI. You know what I mean? Like, it's a projection. So
no, because there's been holograms of real people. You know what I mean? Like the Emperor in the original trilogy or whatever. There was holograms of him, but it was clearly just. It was him. It wasn't a CGI version of him. It was a real camera pointing at a real actor.
I get it to a certain extent, but I also feel like they're trying to do, like, he was very, like, even when we saw him, they always kept him in the shadows, and like kind of like we never really got to see him. Plus, look, since he was a hologram, we don't really know if that's really the guy. Like, is that a holographic representation of Supreme Leader Snoke, or is that just another guy using a hologram to represent himself that way?
Also, the holograms have changed in however long. The holograms used to be blue and liney and quite poor for a really sophisticated world, but the holograms have got HD now, so that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Which I maybe thought, because at first I didn't think it was a hologram. I think that was supposed to be the trick. Like, it was big guy, and I was like, whoa, he's big, and then it turned out to be a hologram. You're like, oh my god! I think that was supposed to be the trick, but holograms really crisped up in the last
that is for sure. And I mean, look, the other thing is, like, some people have like begun nitpicking this film on that basis, like, oh, there's some CGI characters and blah blah blah. There was a lot of CGI in Star Wars always. Like, no.
I mean, the originals, obviously, because of the time, were limited.
Yeah, but I mean, dude, like, the thing is, though, you have to admire the stuff they do. Like, the fact that BB-8 is an actual droid, and the stuff that they, like, the scenes that they have him participate in.
That's
when
impressive.
You have Rey walking down the stairwell to finally locate the lightsaber for the first time, like when it's calling to her, and you see BB-8 just like bumping behind her on each step. That's really happening, and you could hear the thuds and everything. They did some really cool practical effects with this movie. When the first scene when she meets BB-8 and there's that smuggler trying to steal him.
Yeah.
That's a real character. You can see that that's built.
Oh, that's definitely practical, and that was awesome.
And it was so cool. And they did so much cool stuff. Like, in terms of, like, I feel like they didn't get enough credit for the practical effects that they did. Because they've definitely stepped up a lot of really, really cool stuff. And the sets that they build are incredibly cool. A lot of them are very, very neat and just absolutely incredibly well done.
That's true. I felt like there was more
That's
more
fair.
CGI than
Yeah.
I was expecting.
Of course, yeah. That's the thing. It's like, look, when we do this, obviously it's a conversation. The good thing is that there is some disagreement. You know what I mean? If we were both sitting here and just going, "It was the greatest thing ever," it's like it wouldn't. Yeah, it wouldn't be a particularly interesting review. Because again, keep in mind, guys, I think for both of us, we loved this film, or at least, sorry, I don't know if you did, but for me, I loved this movie. But I'm also trying to be objective.
So, you know.
Yeah, but I don't know. It was really, really fun. It was such an incredibly cool experience, and I'm definitely planning to watch it again. So, nonetheless, let's move on. What else did you feel like was not particularly strong about the film?
I thought the characters. I know everybody loves Rey, and I think Rey's a great character, and I really like her.
Yes.
What's it called? Finn. He was a little odd. I felt he was a little undeveloped because
I think that's a fair criticism of everybody to a certain extent.
Well, yeah, it's the first one. They've got to introduce a lot of new characters, but I thought him.
You have to consider the fact that they've taken 30 years in the Star Wars universe, right? Like, what has happened in these 30 years, right? Because that's the time. And they're trying to catch us up with the old cast while also introducing this whole new cast. So
and we're probably gonna see loads more of Finn. Poe and all the people I felt were undeveloped. They're probably gonna have Finn and Poe might even have their own film at one point. You know,
sure, maybe at some point, like a spin-off.
Who knows? They're gonna keep churning them out by the looks of it. So, but what was weird about Finn was he's supposed to be a soldier, and he was like trained from birth. Is he?
Yeah.
At what point?
Yeah.
He's trained from birth. He's brainwashed. He's mind washed into being this soldier who's all about order and fighting. And then he kind of turned a little easy. He's like, oh no, the First Order shot some people. I can't be with them anymore. Like, what did you think the First Order was doing for those 20 years that you were
I don't know. They are brainwashed, right? And remember, he does mention that's his first battle. So, like, that was the first time that he went out into actual battle. Before that, it was all training. So, during his first battle, he gets to see how ruthless the First Order is. And more importantly, I guess maybe Kylo Ren is in terms of, like,
it just seems a little odd because they even said that he showed no signs of, like, betraying the First Order during his training and everything. It just seems a little odd.
Yeah. I mean, let's put it this way. What I will say is I think maybe what this is going to, the notion of what probably my biggest issue with the film is, having slept on it, is the fact that there's a lot of convenience.
Yes.
There's quite a few things in this movie that feel like, well, isn't that convenient? You know, if you really. Yeah, if you really start thinking about it, like, there's even specifically a line, like, you just mentioned, where there's a conversation between Rey and Maz, and Maz is telling her all about Luke's lightsaber because that's the first time that she gets her hands on it, if you remember, in the movie, and she tells her, oh, that's a story for another time, because she asks her, hey, how do you have that thing? And she's like, it's a story for another time. It's like, well, what? Okay, I guess it is. So that is certainly the case. There was some other stuff that you could definitely start nitpicking and kind of making the argument of convenience in terms of, how Han and Chewie find the Millennium Falcon. And they do kind of explain some things in that regard, which I really did like. Like, they did try to sometimes have lines in there to kind of negate that, in terms of, remember when they go to Maz and Han specifically says, like, look, if I was able to track you down, the First Order is going to find you easily. We need to get a new ship, and we need to get that droid on a clean ship. So it's like, they do explain it. It's just, it's definitely still at times quite convenient in terms of them being like, well, we got to tell the story in a very certain manner. So
did they even explain how the Falcon got on Jakku in the first place?
well, they did have that scene, remember, where Han, when the first time that he finds it, he was like, oh, it went to, like, he lists specific stuff in terms of
Did he lose it in a betting?
I don't remember specifically if he mentions it, but he says something along the line. Again, it was a pretty quickly, like, talking line, but he essentially just blurs out something like, oh, then it went to this galaxy and then this galaxy, and then Rey says, and now it's owned by that weapons or parts dealer or whatever it is, remember, on Jakku?
Yeah.
So
okay.
I guess that's
also,
kind of a
little convenient that when
sure,
they're running to
yeah,
their ship and that ship gets blown up, and like, okay, I guess we'll take this ship that just happens to be the Millennium Falcon, but whatever. It's if there was no convenience, there'd be no movie, there'd be no story.
Yeah.
So we gotta stop nitpicking at that, I guess. But
yeah, to me, again, I feel like there is some convenience, but it's like, it's one of those things, like, you know, it's like when you watch many other films, you know, when we were talking about it last night, one thing that came up to mind was the eagles in the Lord of the Rings universe and such. It's like, it's sometimes you just have components that are utilized to push the story into a certain way, and you just have to consider, like, the limitations within which you're working. So I don't feel like any of them were, like, egregious or so far-fetched that I was like, well, that's just stupid, and, like, how dare they, that's a completely, you know, magical pill that can just reverse everything that happened, you know?
yeah.
Nothing was that egregious, so I didn't feel really bad about any of it, or that any of it was particularly unfair. So I would say probably that's my stance on it. How did you feel overall? Like, was it a huge deterrent for you, or was it just something that you were like, yeah, at times it was, like, a little bit convenient, but
there's nothing here on my list that's really a huge deterrent. These are very nitpicky things.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
these are us, I think, just being fair in terms of being objective at evaluating the movie. Pointing out that, look, it's not flawless. It does have issues. It's just that, to me, I don't think any of them are big enough to make me go like, oh, that's not a good movie.
No, I have one more point that's kind of about the general gist of the movie, and then the rest of the cons I have are kind of just nitpicky parts about certain scenes.
Fair enough.
The other last thing, like, big thing that I didn't like about the movie was I thought there was a little too much comedy in it. I like comedy, don't get me wrong, and I felt most of the jokes were pretty good and funny, and I laughed out loud multiple times, which I wasn't expecting. I think that's just what it was. I wasn't expecting to see so much comedy in a Star Wars movie. I don't felt like it belonged. I felt like I was watching Guardians of the Galaxy or something. I think, you know, Star Wars has always had a little bit of comedy, but I felt just too much. I think too much comedy didn't belong. I would have preferred a more serious tone.
You see, the funny thing is, for me, that's probably one of the biggest positives of this movie is the comedy, is because I feel like what they did is essentially they created a modern Star Wars film. Like, I feel like doing that beat for beat and those paces of Star Wars, the traditional Star Wars films, the original trilogy, not accounting for the prequels. I feel like the modern movie going audience would not be able to attach themselves, especially new fans, because they are very slow and they are plodding and they're a lot slower paced. This is definitely a lot quicker of a film. There's a lot more stuff going on, which is going to be another point that I'm going to make in just a moment here about how this is, in many regards, the original trilogy condensed into 2 hours. Like, they kind of do stuff from all those movies and just make it into it's almost like kind of like a remake of the original trilogy.
That's another thing I have on the list. If you've seen the original trilogy, you've seen this one, kind of.
Yeah, to a certain extent. The story, the certain key plot points, yes, but at the same time,
a Death Star, you know, planet a droid. There's very
absolutely yes, sand planet, forest planet, ice planet.
That's another thing.
There's definitely a lot of the same beats being hit, but I felt like the comedy was such an alleviating component of this movie because there's a lot of dark stuff in it, especially like implied stuff, you know, the torture by Kylo and stuff like that. But at the same time, I felt like the comedy never which is interesting because we have another friend who did say that it felt forced, no pun intended.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
to me, I felt the opposite. I felt like all of the comedy was like natural in terms of it came from the characters and their personalities. You know what I mean? Like we didn't get comedy that felt shoved down our throats or comedy that felt written for the characters. You know, there was moments that were funny with the way that Chewie would like shrug, you know, and people would laugh, or just the way that a line was being said was funny. It wasn't even that when you think about the line, it's like that wasn't funny, but because of the way that it was delivered and the mannerisms of the character, it was funny. So I would definitely say that like one that comes to mind is for sure in the early get-go, like the very first scene of the movie when Kylo Ren and Poe Dameron come face to face.
Of course. Yeah.
And there's just this awkward silence and Poe just goes like, so what do we do here? Like, do you start talking? Do I start talking? It's kind of hard to read you with this whole mask thing you got going on.
That was brilliant. I love that bit.
Yeah, it was hilarious. Like, it was really, really genuinely funny, and the way it was delivered, it fit that character.
It did feel a little Star-Lordy, though. You know, it did feel.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, to a certain extent, I agree. But the funny thing is, like, you see, there's always this weird thing that happens when Guardians of the Galaxy came out. Everybody was comparing it to Star Wars. Now that Star Wars comes out, a new one, we all compare it to Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, it's the only like big blockbuster.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is like the interesting thing is like I feel like that's just an inherent thing that audiences do is we just kind of like, because there are some similar components about them, you know, we do look at both and kind of go like, hey, look, yeah, they took some inspiration from Guardians, just like Guardians clearly took lots of inspiration from Star Wars. So I don't feel like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, they just borrowed from Guardians of the Galaxy all the ideas. I didn't feel that way. I felt like, look, we loved Guardians of the Galaxy because it was this funny take on a space crazy drama, action drama. Here, they did the same thing. They were like, listen, we're going to add humor. And I felt like, you know what? It needed to be there and it felt distinct. You know, it starts this new trilogy in a very distinct manner to where as much as, yes, this is set in the Star Wars universe, this was J.J. Abrams' movie. This wasn't a George Lucas film. Yes. And the comedy and the pacing of it was something that you could definitely point to and say, like, that's very different. That's not the way that George Lucas would have done it.
No.
Even if it was the same script, which is interesting.
I think we've seen enough of George Lucas. Yeah, that's what I meant earlier. I think in the other review we did, I said about the tone. It felt it didn't feel like a Star Wars movie, but it was a good movie. Nevertheless,
interesting.
It's obviously different director. It's gonna have completely different feel to it. But I felt that it was. I felt that the feel was good. I felt the vibe was good. They did everything pretty much right, but I you know me. I mean, across the board.
Yeah, I mean,
movies,
that's
video
again
games, TV. I like a more serious tone.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, again, that's just a matter of like personal preference of like what makes a Star Wars movie a Star Wars movie. You know what I mean? Like we could talk about that till the cows come home because
Also,
it's like it's such an in-depth point that you could go to. So to me, it definitely did. To you, because what you were looking for is a bit different and tonally different. You felt like it wasn't the case.
Yeah, I think we'll get that in the next one though, possibly because Empire was the middle one.
Yes.
That was a lot darker. Hopefully,
correct.
The next one, the middle one, might be a lot darker. Who knows? And then that might be the best one.
Well, it certainly looks like it because of who's directing it and everything. Like I think it's Rian Johnson, right? So
okay, we're not getting Abrams again. He's
no.
Directing
He's not
all of them. That's
nope.
Okay.
No,
Wait,
it's Rian Johnson, and then the last
or?
one is I'm talking about episode 8. And episode 9 is going to be directed by Colin Trevorrow, who is the guy that directed Lego Jurassic. Not
Lego Jurassic.
Sorry, Jurassic World. That's what it was.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. I thought Abrams was doing the whole shebang.
No.
Okay.
No.
That's
they are
cool.
working together. I think he's producing all of them as well. But
it's going to be interesting to see how the whole, the differentiation.
How it comes together. Yeah. That's what I'm intrigued by as well.
Having 3 different people work on one vision is gonna, there's obviously gonna be different.
But they do have Catherine. Oh man, what's her name? Is it Cassidy, I think, or something like that? She's like overseeing the whole thing. So they do have obviously people from Lucasfilm and such kind of still like, holding the puppets and kind of still controlling the overall storyline and the overall universe, because they've been really, really careful now ever since they removed a whole bunch of stuff from canon. They've been very careful about making sure that whatever they release is canon and it fits and it all makes sense together. So that certainly has been the case. What?
I know you can't really like shove away the prequels and say the prequels aren't canon. I wish they would, though, because that means midichlorians wouldn't need to be a thing. Yeah. And that means anybody could be a Jedi, which would have been a lot better than, she can be a Jedi because she's the daughter of Luke or whatever, Yeah,
I do think that was probably one of the biggest mistakes storyline-wise that were made, because it restricts the universe quite a bit. Like, we always have to have these certain families involved.
Anybody could have been a Jedi before the midichlorians.
Yeah, and it does kind of, one of those things where, like, when Maz talks about, like, close your eyes and think about the Force being around you, it's like, well, if you know the prequels, it's bacteria and stuff like that. So
it's inside of you, not around you,
So it's definitely, again, some convenience, and that was definitely the case. I think that one of the most egregious conveniences that they had was with Poe Dameron, because he crashes, him and Finn crash, and then suddenly, like 2/3 through the movie, he's back. And then when he asks him, like, hey, how'd you get out? He was like, I woke up and you were gone and the TIE fighter was gone and I just made my way back to base. And
Didn't even look for him? I mean,
okay, like, I guess that happened pretty quickly. And you didn't really bother retrieving BB-8 at that point or whatever. I guess he knew that, like, that was definitely one when I was like, and I didn't notice it when I watched the movie. This was something that I came up with, like, in the morning. I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, that is a point that, they kind of just completely went like, hey, listen, I'm good.
How he did it. How the heck did he get off Jakku? I don't know. I would love to know, but I doubt we ever will.
Yeah, but again, the biggest thing I think we have to acknowledge is this is a 2-hour movie, and a little bit, that had such an insanely high task of covering everything that happened to the older generation, and then what's going on with this new cast, and introducing all of them and making all of them make sense and impactful, and give them all, like, 1 or 2 scenes where they get to shine. That's tough. It's like, essentially, think about it this way. It's like if they did like Avengers after, let's say, only like doing Iron Man or something like that. It's like, it's a really, really tough order, and they did a really good job with delivering with it, and they did a pretty awesome job, all things considered. I think that we had a little bit of a analogy with like food, remember, where we felt like this was like an incredibly delicious appetizer. Like, it's like you get a really good appetizer, but then you're still hungry. Like, you're like, okay, where's my entree? Like, now I want to get my actual, like, belly full. And it's really cool because, look, I think that very well might be the order of this next trilogy. Episode 8 will be the entree. That's where all the meat and potatoes of this whole thing is going to come through. And then we're going to get our dessert in episode 9. And it even fits with the choices of the directors that they went with. You got somebody who's known for beautiful shots and really, really nice cinematics, and generally speaking, a good storyteller in J.J. Abrams first. Then you got Rian Johnson, who's much more so known for like dark and gritty, and
that's my Empire Strikes Back. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Nose to the grindstone kind of storylines. And then after that, you got Colin Trevorrow, who more so, I mean, like, obviously he's done some smaller movies before, but we know him only from Jurassic World, which was a big, bombastic, fun film. So we'll see. I mean, it was, again, I thought it was a fun movie. It's not great or anything, but we'll see. You got to remember that you also have to kind of operate with the hand that's dealt to you. So hopefully the script is strong, and Colin Trevorrow can put it together and deliver in that regard. So with that being said, is there anything else like generally negative that you wanted to touch on, so we could get into more of the...
Nothing in particular. There was a few little things that I might bring up later when we get onto the certain scenes, but
okay,
pretty much. Yeah, that's it.
So let's do this. Positives.
My God, this was good.
Yeah. Wow. First of all, like, again, we kind of touched on some of the positives for me, which were some negatives for you, which was interesting. So it was a really cool distinction. But in general, I think that for the most part, the entire new cast is great. Like Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron, awesome. Finn is incredible. John Boyega, Daisy Ridley as Rey, really great.
She was fantastic.
I think she was the best character. I tweeted out saying that it was incredible how. You know what? I don't know why, and this is probably a really derpy thing to say, but the moment when we see her for the first time, first of all, I love the setup. I love how they painted a picture of her life in just a few scenes of like, she's a scavenger that every day she climbs into this ginormous Star Destroyer and she lives in a
shot when she's like roping down.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
And she's just. She breaks off little parts that she knows are worth something potentially. And because of that, she's gained this incredible knowledge of engineering. And that's how she's able to, like, you know, operate vehicles in such an extensive manner and everything. But then she polishes all those pieces up, and then she's responsible for trading them in, where she essentially then gets some sort of rations and food in return for it.
Just to survive.
She eats. She lives in an old, broken down AT-AT, which was really cool too.
Yeah.
And they just did such an exceptional job with that character. Like, I loved the whole arc of her story is so good. And I don't know why that scene when she rides down that sand, like, you know, when she retrieves the parts for the first time and she rides down the sand.
Yeah.
I don't know why during that scene I was like, wow. Like, I just went, like, it got to me for some reason. I don't know why. For some reason that I was like emotional during that scene. I don't know exactly why, but it's just like it was during that scene that I was like, this is Star Wars. Like it was so vast, and it was such a, like, the scale of that destroyer behind her
when she's riding on the speeder.
It's like it's like so
good.
Wow, it is so incredibly well done. And then you want to talk about the big baddie, well, one of the big baddies that is revealed to us, Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. I mean, come on, good googly moogly. Does that dude knock it out of the park?
So cool as a villain. I think he's a perfect, just cool, badass villain. He stops a freaking laser bolt.
Oh, yeah, that was such a cool scene.
And it's just there, like, glitching and kind of just floating, like... And he's pushing it back with his force, and I think he had a lens flare there, which is nice.
Yeah.
And it was so good until he took the helmet off for me.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Then he turned into Hayden Christensen from Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones.
Wow, that is some real flack.
He turned into a whiny brat who just needs a good spanking from his pops and needs to be.
Well, we know he didn't get that.
No, quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. I still thought he was cool. But
I don't know. To me, I felt like he was the perfect villain for this franchise. And the reason for it is because I feel like he's a villain that can grow with the trilogy. I feel like he's a villain that will reach his potential either in episode 8 or maybe even in episode 9. You know, I think that he is the perfect kind of... First of all, we find out that, of course, if you don't know, he's actually Ben Solo, which was such a nice, obviously, nod to Obi-Wan. That's what they were going for, I'm sure. And it's... First of all, I also really loved that they revealed that to us like a third way through the movie. Like, they didn't wait all the way till the end to go like, oh, you're my kid, actually. You know, it wasn't. It would have been the cheap thing. But right away, you hear Supreme Leader Snow go like, your father is there, you know? And it's like, oh, okay. You just surprise us right off the bat. And I was like, there's some big that's happening in this movie. Because if they gave that away in the first third, some big is happening. And it was... I felt like he was the perfect, like these temper tantrums that he throws. I know you could say, well, that's kind of Hayden Christensen, you know, like.
But I think that's better. I think that's how they should have done Hayden Christensen.
So is your issue then that it's not? He's essentially what Hayden Christensen should have been.
Yeah, he would have been perfect for Anakin Skywalker. That character and just the way he acts, his outbursts, his edginess,
fair enough.
Great.
So yeah, keep that in mind, guys. For those that were about to jump down his throat and attack him, he means that's what Hayden Christensen's character. That's what Anakin should have been.
That would have been amazing. If he
at the same time, he just has this like, I loved that, like when you mentioned when he took off the helmet, I loved the distinction between the two. It's almost like he has like this bipolar thing going on, where when he has the helmet, he is fully dark side and he is fully committed, but every time that we saw him in the movie without the helmet, he was vulnerable. It's almost like he used the helmet to
confidence barrier thing,
exactly. Because every time that he took it off, he was vulnerable. If you look back at every scene in the movie, practically, I would say, he was vulnerable. He showed vulnerability, or he became vulnerable as a result of that.
He became a kid, which is what he is. He's a young
guy
and who's missing his parents, probably.
Yeah, and it was really, really cool. And speaking of which, him and his parents, of course, one of the biggest spoilers of the film, and one of the biggest things that transpired in the movie is the death of Han Solo. Of course, Han Solo, and Kylo come together on a bridge, face to face, upon which Kylo Ren tells him that, look, I've been struggling with something and I need help with something, and I'm not even sure that I can actually go through with it. Could you help me? And Han, of course, being the loving father that he is, says yes, after promising to bring Ben back upon the request of Leia. And as he reaches out to him to hold on to his lightsaber, boom, he turns it on, slashes him through. And even at that moment, Han does not show despise or hatred towards his son. He still
beautiful.
Runs his hand across his face and kind of says, like, I'm at peace. If this is what you had to do, then it is what you had to do. And he still loved him as a son, which was just really, really great acting from Harrison Ford. He really did not phone it in. And we saw Han Solo. At no point in this movie did I feel like, oh, that's Harrison Ford playing Han Solo. It was like, that's Han. And that was about as good of a scene in terms of acting wise as you could get.
Perfect way. Yeah, I think if he was going to die, I don't think they could have done his death any better than they did.
Yeah,
of course, I'm sad it died, but again, it's good that he died, because obviously, eventually,
his death has such a rippling effect now, because now it's almost like that was the event that allowed Kylo to harness potentially the dark side.
Now he's ready,
because Supreme Leader Snoke even hints at that. He says that now he's ready to complete his training. Now it's time to get him to that next level, because he did this action that was required. And it was definitely, look, don't get me wrong, it's a sad thing that happened, but I feel like it's one of those things that I really, really hope they don't reverse. If they come back and say, oh, he's actually alive, he fell down and he didn't take all that much damage, it would be, honestly, I think it would be the dumbest thing that they could do in terms of hindering this film. Like,
there's no way. He
has to remain dead, which pains me to say, but he has to remain dead.
He got a lightsaber through the chest. You don't come back from that. That he's gone.
Yeah.
He fell clear of the banister. There's no way he hung on or any stupid thing like that. He's dead. And,
and that planet blew up. It's like, even if he survived the fall, he didn't get out.
Did we see? Obviously Kylo didn't die, but did we see him leave the planet before it blew up?
Kylo?
Yeah.
We did not see him leave the planet. However, we did get that scene, where General Hux runs in to Supreme Leader Snoke, and he says to him, like, "Sir, the planet is about to blow up. What do you advise us to do? Do we need to retreat?" And blah blah blah. And he says, "Bring me Kylo Ren. It's time to finish his training and get off the planet."
Teleported out of there or something.
Yeah, they must have got off.
But
I mean,
he was laid
clearly
injured in the forest.
Yes,
it's a little crazy that he would have managed to escape in time.
To be fair, though, Chewie finds Rey, right? So it's like, yes, is it convenient? But at the same time, I'm sure they have some sort of a tracker on him or something like that, where they could explain finding him. Like, again, it's a very nitpicky thing, so I don't think that was an issue at all. Another thing that I really loved was the dynamic of all the bad guys. I love that we got 3 new bad guys, and all of them have a distinct, different tone. Kylo is definitely very much the physical threat, as well as potentially down the line the mental threat. General Hux is very much not a physical threat, but he is the, like, commander, like your typical kind of general type. That's why, he is General Hux.
they're kind of, I think they're kind of a bit copied and pasted from the original trilogy.
Yeah,
though.
of course,
You've got
absolutely.
Kylo, which is Darth Vader. You've got the Emperor Snoke, and you've got Grand Moff Tarkin, which is the general guy. You know,
Yes,
they're very similar characters
but
we've
Tarkin
seen
and
before.
Vader had more respect for each other. They were
Yeah,
they
well, they're
didn't
younger,
have
but
here.
they're both younger though.
Yeah. Here, what I love is that they do have this kind of a rivalry. You know,
Yeah.
where Kylo says like, if you know what's good for you, you're gonna get this done, and you're gonna retrieve the plans to Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
When he has the helmet on, and then when that backfires, we see Hux kind of putting Kylo in his place in front of the Emperor. Or sorry, the Supreme Leader.
Same guy.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really cool scene. And then, of course, with all that considered, we also have Snoke, who we know so very little about. He essentially plays the role of Thanos from Guardians of the Galaxy, where he is the big baddie. We know that he is going to be the final goal. And I wouldn't be surprised that, well, we don't know he's Darth Plagueis, but that would make sense.
He's
Just
got to be.
Just like Luke is the final Jedi left out there, and he's out there, he has to be the final
he has a
Sith.
big scar. Snoke has a big scar across his face, doesn't he? I'm thinking that's where Palpatine got a saber and killed him in his sleep, maybe.
Could be. Yeah,
As
he
Darth
got scarred.
Plagueis.
That'd be that's a
I
good
think
theory.
It's a very good theory that he is
Yeah.
Darth Plagueis.
Yeah, he there's a very good chance that he is. The one thing I'm very hopeful is that he's not that big, because I think it would be so goofy
They're
if eventually we see Luke or Rey or
Try and
maybe
take
even
on
Kylo fighting this giant, like,
Be like
20-foot
Shadow of
monster.
the Colossus or something.
Yeah,
stupid.
that would really take me out. So I'm hopeful that that's literally just a projection, and
it
he
has
is.
to be.
Look, don't get me wrong. Vader was pretty freaking huge, so you can make him tall, but don't make him 20 feet tall. That
He
would
was
be
a couple
ridiculous.
meters high, Vader. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but not that big.
that was definitely, again, the bad guy is really, really great in this film, and they did an excellent job of nailing them overall.
Yes. Also,
And again, planting the seeds with all of them.
speaking of the bad guys, really quick, they kind of made the stormtroopers not just cannon fodder and made them people, which was good. Especially with like Captain Phasma, which she was in for about 10 seconds, which was a bit disappointing. But it made the stormtroopers more than just mindless fodder for the Jedi to kill. So that was good.
Yeah, and they've got way better aim now. Like 1,000% better aim. Like they literally, they no longer have somebody standing in front of them and they miss. they can actually fire at them
Also,
and
it
hit the
felt
target.
Like the lasers and the lightsabers, the weapons had like a lot more impact than they did in the original. Because like
That's
lasers in the original just kind of flew past people, didn't
Yeah.
make an explosion on the wall behind them. They just kind of disappeared. But these, you felt the impact when, like, in the first scene, when the first stormtrooper goes down and Finn's there with the blood. You just feel like the weapons are a real threat, and they're not just, they're not just like the original trilogy where the stormtroopers aren't really a threat at all. I thought that was good. So.
Yeah, they definitely did a great job of making it sound less like pew pew and giving it that kind of like gravitas
real
and everything.
Warzone
Yeah,
explosions, real good sound design.
yeah, and they did do a lot of stuff like that in terms of I remember I told you about that, where Adam Driver did an interview about his lightsaber, and he was like, I think Kylo's lightsaber is very much a metaphor for him as a character. And it's interesting that they used a lot of that in the movie, like the items of certain characters and such kind of represented their personalities, and their choice of weapons and so on and so forth represented who they are in many different ways, both directly and indirectly. And that was certainly the case. Like, he's definitely very much rough around the edges, but a very, very big threat.
Speaking of weapons as well, just really quick, we never got to see much action with Rey's like stick. She had like a laser stick or something or whatever.
The staff.
I thought that was going to be a lot more of a thing.
Well, I think the reason why we maybe thought it was special is because they used that to cover up the fact that she was going to have a lightsaber. They used that to cover, because that was the big twist, right? Like, they revealed to us, hey, John Boyega, Finn is going to hold the lightsaber in the trailers, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, ooh, so is he a Jedi and everything? It was like really interesting.
He tried.
But then they twist that around on us, right? By actually her being the one that's the Jedi, and they just use the marketing of the staff. She still utilizes it. You can see that in the early get-go, it is definitely her go-to weapon. Like, she has it with her at all times, and she's always carrying it around her shoulder and such. So it's definitely her favorite tool while she's a scavenger.
Who
but then when things...
when you got a lightsaber, you know?
Obviously. But she even carries it when she's at the very final scene, when she comes to Luke. She still has it with her.
She's got to give the saber back now, hasn't she? So
exactly.
She's got to go back to the staff, I guess.
And that was, of course, another big tease. And maybe with this, we could kind of start wrapping it up. But what did you? I don't know why so many people are still questioning whether or not she's a Skywalker. To me, I'm like, it's pretty damn obvious that she is Luke's kid. Like, there was so many things that hint to that. The conversations that she has with Maz and how she implies to her that the reason why the saber has shown you everything and now it's pulling to you is because it used to be your father's. Like, come on. Yeah. Like, that was so, like, such a direct and obvious thing to me that I don't know how... I don't see... Like, some people are saying, oh, well, you know, because... From what I remember, previously they said that Han and Leia had 2 kids, twins, 1 boy, 1 girl. And some people were saying that it's Rey. She's way younger than Kylo, and the flashback that she has, in that flashback, she's a kid, and Kylo's already leading the Knights of Ren. So if they're twins, that would never work out. Plus, how does Han not recognize her? And when Princess Leia, when she says, or sorry, General Leia, or General Organa, I guess.
General Organa.
Because remember, C-3PO keeps calling her princess, but she's like, I'm no princess or whatever. She's not royalty. But the interesting thing about that was...
Don't know how you step down from being a princess and then go to a general, but...
Yeah, she was not interested.
I don't know how the politics works in that.
Maybe there's no kingdom to be royal over, so maybe that's why. But essentially, like she says, remember, it was at that time that I lost both of you. She doesn't say all 3 of you. Or something like that.
That's
she says directly to him, to Han, that it's you and Ben that she loses. So she's got to be Luke's kid. Now the interesting thing that you then have to discuss is who's the mother, right? Because we never got any direct love interest in the films. Now, from what I remember in the expanded universe, like in the novels and everything, they did have. I think a character that I read about was Mara Jade, I think was the name of her, who was also like a smuggler, and she was like trained by Palpatine and stuff like that. But then she, thanks to Luke, she like betrays him and everything, and that's how they become like lovers and everything. So if that's her, that would be very fitting because she was a smuggler and she was kind of like, you know, had a little bit of that kind of scavenging personality to her. So that would fit. Plus, I think there's just so much that hinted at that. I mean, like, she's left on a planet, or a sand planet, and she meets up with a droid. And it's like, those are the beats that her father went through. That's the same stuff. He was on Tatooine, but she's on Jakku, both sand planets. She was dealing with droids and like having this like, you know, day-to-day very routine life, and then is thrusted into a heroic situation and rises to the occasion. And it's like, it to me, it's pretty obvious that she is Rey Skywalker.
Yeah, I do not disagree. I agree. She's got to be. I mean, for her to be anyone interesting, I think she's got to be. So the one thing I will say is that I'm very, very hopeful that as we get more Star Wars movies, and we are, like with Rogue One and everything like that, I hope that they also start expanding that universe, because my one concern with Star Wars becoming now a regular thing, like we know that at least for the next 3 years, we're getting new Star Wars movies every year. So, and probably beyond, I would imagine. That's probably a pretty safe bet. But let's say when you get to the point where we get more and more Star Wars movies, I feel like they might be a little bit at risk of always revolving around the same families. It's like, it's always Solo Skywalkers. Like, you know, I wish that they will start over time to expand it, because they did hint at, for example, Luke was training multiple Jedi at the time. Kylo was the leader of the Knights of Ren. Where are all these other knights? Did he kill all of them? And if so, then they weren't all that powerful, because look, he gets taken out. Of course, he is hurt and everything, but he gets taken out by an inexperienced
Jedi or user of the Force, let's put it that way, in the form of Rey.
Yeah, he's not that good.
Yeah, so it's like he's still very, very much an apprentice. He's no, like, you know, lord or anything like that, but he was the leader of the Knights of Ren. So where are all these other knights? And on top of that, again, they did say that it was Kylo and another Jedi that he was training at the time, and Kylo was the one that turns to the dark side. Upon which Luke decides to separate himself and take off and everything. But who was that other Jedi, and who are the other Knights of Ren? And none of that is really touched upon. So I'm hopeful that as we get more and more movies, they start expanding the world more and kind of introduce completely brand new characters, which again, they did do this time. And the ones that are new, Poe and Finn, new characters, not connected to the Solo or Skywalker family as far as we know. And I think that that was really, really great. And I think that it needs to remain that way in order to continue expanding this galaxy instead of constantly shrinking it down to the family.
I think this trilogy might be, you know, the final Skywalker trilogy, and then we'll move on to, you know,
I don't know. I think the Skywalkers always have to remain a part of the story. It's they are especially
go at some point. I mean, they can't continue.
Yeah, but as long as Metachlorians are a part of the canon, they have to be, because you can't have. What are they going to be like? No Jedis, you know?
But that's the thing that might, you know, in Rogue One, there's probably not going to be any Jedis.
Sure, but when they do the episode films, like those are the one-off movies, you know, like they're going to do the Boba Fett and Han and so on and so forth. Like those are the one-off films, and they'll be their own unique stories, and not unique. They're still within canon, but they're going to be one-off movies. The episode movies, I think, will always have the Solo and the Skywalker family within them, which is nothing wrong with that. I just hope that they continue to add more components and build around that foundation to get like a beautiful building.
I think they could do that. I don't think they will, though, because it's a huge universe out there. You know, there could be so many other societies or groups of people like Jedi, or, you know, like the Sith. There's loads of other factions and people with abilities and like fancy stuff like that. So I think they could really go anywhere with it. I don't think they should be limited. So.
And I think that really is a great way to wrap this up, is that this was a film that I think did everything that it needed to do. It succeeded, you know what I mean? It definitely didn't take any huge risks, but the places where it took risk it worked, and it was impactful. And
we needed this.
And I think that, again, this is like, again, going back to another food metaphor, it's like they gave us the plate, and now let's put some food on it.
Let's go to the buffet and,
you know, it's like stuff. It looks. I've never been this excited about Star Wars. It's like it's really, really exciting in terms of what did they do going forward in the films, and what did they do elsewhere? Because we know that there are projects being worked on in terms of video games. There is books, there's comics, and all of it now has been unleashed. It's like now the first kind of adrenaline shot has been delivered. So now let's start giving us details and juicy nuggets and exploring and telling us stories about the Guavian gang that shows up on the transporter and I don't know, the smuggler that was played by Simon Pegg, by the way, if you didn't know. Like,
I did not realize it was Simon Pegg. No,
not the guy that's like giving her rations. That's Simon Pegg.
Oh, the CGI
By the way, do you know what's crazy? You know that lovely scene when she manipulates the stormtrooper?
Yeah.
Like I will. That's so Daniel Craig.
Really?
Yes, James Bond.
That's
He was that stormtrooper. I don't know if that's true, but that is what people have said.
In this, I noticed one of the Death Star when Finn's escaping in the TIE fighter with Poe, one of the Imperial guys or First Order guys is a guy who recently appeared in Game of Thrones. I noticed him, and I think there was a few other cameos. I think everybody just wanted the finger in the pie. You know, everybody.
Well, plus the guy from Heroes was one of the pilots. Remember?
Matt Parkman from Heroes. Me and Connor.
Yeah, it was really, really cool, and General Akbar is in it too, which was cool.
Admiral.
Why do I keep calling him General every time, dude? I've done that like 50 times.
General.
I know. I don't know why I keep doing it. It's I don't know. It's a problem. So, what wasn't a problem was this movie. We hope you guys enjoyed our absolutely nerdy, almost 1 hour long conversation. If you stuck all the way through it, thank you so very much for being awesome and watching the whole thing. Let us know in the comment section below what you thought. Was it good? Was it bad? What was good? What was bad? Keep in mind, again, that throughout this entire discussion, this is all just opinions. And at the end of the day, we couldn't be more excited about Star Wars. I think I'll speak for both of us when I say that.
I love Star Wars since I was like 8 years old, and I will continue to love it. So.
And this, I think that this still like whets your appetite further.
Ooh,
it's like, it's
fantastic.
definitely a step in very much multiple steps in the right direction. And I cannot wait to see what happens again in a galaxy far, far away.
Ooh, that was fancy.